Don't want to pay a Bitcoin ransom? You could try Wannacry. The Geek Squad snitches, leaks of the next Surface Pro. Ian Thompson from The Register tells us how Microsoft is stockpiling patches. And Jason sits down with Android's top brass. All that and more coming up on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Tech News Today, episode 1772, recorded Friday, May 19th, 2017. This episode of Tech News Today is brought to you by Blue Apron, the #1 fresh ingredient and recipe delivery service in the country. See what's on the menu this week and get 3 meals free with your first purchase and free shipping by going to blueapron.com/TNT. And by Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. When it comes to the big decision of choosing a mortgage lender, work with one who has your best interest in mind. Use Rocket Mortgage for a transparent, trustworthy home loan process that's completely online at quickenloans.com/TNT. Hello and welcome to Tech News Today. This is the show where we talk about everything that happened in technology today. I am Megan Maroney. Jason Howell is still down at Google I/O finishing up and heading back up here. But he did send us a clip of an interview he did with some Googlers up there. We'll get to that later in the show. And joining me today is Ian Thompson from The Register. Thanks for coming on, Ian.
Always a pleasure, Megan. Always a pleasure.
I'm excited. We have a couple of your stories to talk about, a couple of other stories that I thought you would be a great person to talk about with. So let's get started.
Okay.
Researchers have found a fix to unlock computers infected with Wannacry, that week-old ransomware that's affected systems all over the world. The tool, called wannakiwi, allows you to avoid paying the Bitcoin ransom, but only if you're running Windows XP, Windows 7, and Windows 2003, and if you haven't rebooted your PC since the attack. The key is not magic. It's math, my friends. It works by finding all the prime numbers that are stored in the ransomware's code. So there was another key that came out, Wannacry, that came out yesterday, but that was only for XP, I think. So this one, and that one required a second app. But this seems like it would work if you haven't rebooted your PC. What do you think, Ian?
Well, there's the rub. If you haven't rebooted, because when you're caught by this sort of thing, the initial reaction is turn off, turn off. So you've instantly wiped the keys that's stored in memory. At the same time, it's very handy in terms of, it's good that we have these kind of tools being developed to deal with this. It's a fairly limited use case, since it's likely that most of the systems that were infected have been turned off and then turned on again. The traditional way of dealing with all computer problems, of course. But, I mean, it's an indication of how much smarter the security industry is getting on these. The previous Wannacry system, it worked on XP, but to be honest, there weren't that many XP infections. It's now emerging. Because, the original exploits weren't working on XP in 2003 systems. When it came to using the worm to spread stuff around, they had to spread through open network shares. But at the same time, at this point, any port in a storm, because the infection rate has been so large that, people are willing to try pretty much anything to get their data back.
And I guess, the the clock is ticking. They said that they would, what was it, a week? I think it was a week, maybe. It's been a week since it happened.
Yeah, a week today. It started to kick off around probably about 5 or 6 a.m. Pacific time. Then the first infections kicked off in Russia, and then in the Middle East, and then Europe, and of course our own National Health Service got heavily hit. Then they spread to America as more people started turning their computers on. And it really went global. I think the total country count is now up to 112, but that may actually be, still growing at the moment.
Yeah, I read 150 different nations, 300,000 computers. So what do you say? I had a family member who texted me and said, am I vulnerable to Wannacry on my Mac? And part of me wanted to say, yes, you're always vulnerable. Like, I didn't want to say no, but I mean, you're really not. It's just it's mostly Windows 7 computers. But I mean, what do you recommend people say when their relatives ask them, what should I be worried about?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, you're right. Apple users can be very smug about this, which seems to be the kind of like the default setting for a lot of Apple users when virus stories hit. But if it's purely a Windows system problem, it's mainly hitting Windows 7 because Windows 10 was fairly well covered. XP, it wasn't going to spread. To Server 2003, it wasn't going to spread. Server 2008, you might still have a problem. The key thing to do is just patch. The patches are out there. They've been out there for 60 days before this malware even started to circulate. So if systems are fully patched up, then fine, you're okay. There are, the NSA or whoever it was who had these particular exploits out there on the web have got in contact with the manufacturers and had patches ready to go pretty much from the first time the shadow brokers leaked the exploit information in the first place. So patch, and patch again. As it turns out, we've now discovered, there was some news out today that, in fact, the initial vector for this malware wasn't people clicking on infected attachments, which is usually the way it goes. What they were doing, what the malware operators were doing, was scanning for open ports using the SMB protocol and pushing the malware onto those. So traditionally, when you get a malware infection, it's because someone's got an email and without thinking clicked on an attachment. And it's been tremendously frustrating this week, having a number of PR companies sending in sort of, oh, we have comment on the Wannacry situation, and they're enclosing it in an attachment which we're supposed to click on. And you're like, yeah, it's not really how this works. But this, it was a question of network shares initially, and then open network protocols. So if you're a consumer user, just patch. That will solve the problem instantly. If you're an IT administrator or network operator, make sure you've got port 445 taken offline in terms of the open-facing internet. Make sure you patched up properly, and warn your users. Just make sure that nobody does anything stupid in the meantime.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what I wanted to say. No, you're not. Your Mac, or they also asked, is my iPad, is my iPhone vulnerable to this? But I also want to, I also wanted to say, but still, don't open attachments from anyone. Don't open Google Docs from anyone you don't know. There was the DocuSign hack. Don't open DocuSign. Anything. So you don't want to say like, oh, you're fine on a Mac. Do whatever you want. Open whatever you want.
Oh, no, I mean, the general rule I take is if you receive an attachment on an email and you don't know the person, then just bin it. If you do know the person, just ping them a line saying, did you send me an attachment? And if so, what's in it? Mm-hmm. Because it may be that their computer had been taken over by malware and it was pinging out spam, malware-laden attachments without their knowledge. And if they haven't actually sent it to you, then, just leave it well alone. So always check with this sort of thing. And hopefully we're going to get to a point where, we're going to get rid of attachments altogether. Just store everything on a secure cloud server and bring it down from that. But as you said, with Google, the recent Google hack demonstrated that that's not entirely safe either. I mean, if you're dealing online, you've got to accept a certain amount of risk. And it's all about avoiding being the low-hanging fruit and being a little more security aware.
Well, there's some other Wannacry news. I have been applauding Microsoft's president and chief legal officer, Brad Smith, for his criticism of governments who stockpile cyber weapons. But you say Microsoft themselves might be stockpiling patches. Now, Microsoft has known since February that the NSA Eternal Blue exploits have been in the wild. They released a patch in March. But you recently discovered that Friday's Windows XP patch was built back in February, but only released on Friday. How did Microsoft find out about Eternal Blue, and why didn't they release a patch right away?
Well, the patch was developed at the same time as the other patches for Eternal Blue. So basically, Microsoft got the word and were told, this is going to be an issue. You need to prepare a patch for this. So that's what they did. But they developed the XP patch in particular, as you say, back in February, but they only released it on the day that the actual ransomware broke. Now, there's a perfectly good reason for this. XP is an out-of-date operating system. It's 16 years old. It's no longer supported. But there are a lot of enterprises who are still running XP on core systems because they either can't be bothered to upgrade, they think it's too expensive, or they're just trying to prepare the ground to shift up to the next level of operating system. Now, for those customers, Microsoft will carry on supporting XP for a fairly hefty price, it's got to be said. I mean, the deal they had with the National Health Service in the UK was it would cost the NHS, I think it's $200 per computer for the first year. I think it goes up to $400 on the second year. So it's a real money spinner for Microsoft. So they developed these patches, and I've had readers coming into me saying, look, we have the super extended support contract for XP. We got patched with this, mid-February. So the patches were out there. I don't have a problem with Brad's point about the NSA shouldn't be hoarding exploits, because I honestly don't think they should. When you get something this widespread, I can understand from a spying perspective, it's very handy to have. But sooner or later, if you found it, somebody else is going to find it. And in this case, somebody else found it in the NSA's own folders, if you know, that is to be believed. So, yes, Microsoft has been stockpiling patches on this because they do due diligence work and they have customers who still need to be supported against it. So I thought it was a teensy bit richer, Brad, to take the sort of the ultra moral high ground, you know, oh, this is, you know, because they've been sitting on patches for this and hadn't released them until it became absolutely necessary to do so. But I do take his central point that our intelligence agencies shouldn't be hoarding large numbers of very, very exploitable software flaws. They should, in almost all cases, give them directly to the manufacturers to fix, because, as I say, if they found them, someone else will.
Well, I mean, how long is Microsoft expected to really patch their operating systems? Like, you know, why aren't we asking them to patch Windows 95?
Oh, no, I agree with you totally on that. I mean, as I say, it's a 16-year-old operating system, and there isn't a car manufacturer on the planet who will support their car beyond 3 or 5 years unless you pay them a ton of money. There really is no reason why Microsoft should feel duty-bound to carry on supporting XP. At the same time, if they've got the patches there and they knew this was coming and they knew it was a serious exploit, just from a goodwill perspective, it might have been a good idea to get it out, because this was a really high-level leak that the shadow brokers put in there. There was a lot of stuff in there that needed to be fixed, and once it was published, everyone with half a brain knew the malware writers were actually going to use it. So with an undisclosed flaw, I can understand not patching XP, because you say it is an outdated operating system. But when you've got an exposed flaw that anybody can pick up, I do think in those circumstances, it would be a good idea for Microsoft to patch. Simply, you don't want an entire pool of hacked PCs online spreading out malware and under the control of third parties if you can possibly avoid it.
Now, the shadow brokers have said that they have more leaks. They're going to leak in June. If you had to guess, would you say that these are things that already have been patched by Microsoft, that Microsoft is holding on to these patches? If you had to guess, what would you say?
Ooh, okay. If I'm going totally out on a limb, and this is just my personal opinion, I don't think the intelligence agencies know what the shadow brokers have got, so therefore they wouldn't have informed manufacturers directly as to what the shadow brokers have got. They might have a good idea based on whether or not the shadow brokers released the full amount of data that they swiped in the first place with this initial release. They're now claiming they're going to do it on a monthly basis, which suggests they've got more. So the intelligence agencies are kind of in a really difficult position, because on the one hand, they need to warn manufacturers if something big is coming down the line. On the other, they still need these tools to spy on other people. So it's really going to be tricky. I think what they're probably going to do is wait until the next release from the shadow brokers comes out, and then that'll give them an idea of what's been taken and how much more is to come. I think, to be honest, they're almost bound to have people at Cisco and Microsoft and Oracle and the other major manufacturers who are on standby by the phone to be told, right, you need to get working on this, this, and this as soon as possible.
Well, speaking of Microsoft, noted leaker Evan Blass of EvLeaks says on VentureBeat that he's obtained photos of the newest Surface Pro ahead of its rumored launch in Shanghai next week. The photos don't show a total redesign, which we'd already heard from Paul Thurott sources. The device will allegedly be called just the Surface Pro, not the Surface Pro 5, which goes along with what Surface head Panos Panay said when he tweeted, "There's no such thing as the Surface Pro 5. Blass says there's no new Surface Book either, which confirms what Mary Jo Foley sources have said. Microsoft has not commented on either of the leaks. I know you're a Windows user. Do you use a Surface?
I've actually just, I do have a Surface Pro 4. I have been using it of late. Honestly, the hardware is fine. The operating system's a dog, but the hardware itself is pretty good. You know, it's nice and slim. It is, as Microsoft has always said with the Pro line, a fully featured computer that happens to be in tablet form. I've got to say, I've had it for a while. I've held off on using it because I do a lot of writing on the train on the way into work and on the way home. And the Surface Pro has a real problem with that kickstand, in that, you know, you can use a laptop on your lap quite happily and have the screen at a good angle, but with a kickstand, you've got to have that extra 6 inches of legroom. And I'm a short ass, so, I don't have the legroom to actually prop this up safely. So I've been using it in tablet form, which is not something that's very good for creating content. I've got to say, I mean, from the leaked photos, the new Pro looks like it's a slight revision. There's nothing out here. If you were on the table, if you're on the side on one side or the other about the Pro, there's nothing there that will really say you must have this. Rumored 4K support. Obviously, the processor lines are going to get an upgrade. And at the XS launch, I was having a chat with some of their hardware guys, and they've come up with some really innovative new cooling methods for the system, which is to be welcomed because the Pros did get very hot, certainly iterations 2 or 3, and a little bit 4 if you've got it charging as well. But, I mean, there are some notable things missing if the article is to be believed, and I'm sure we can talk about this later on, but USB-C doesn't appear to be in there, which, I can kind of understand up to a point because USB-C is still fairly new, but it's now getting to the point where you need to have it onto a laptop in one way or another.
Yeah, that was a lot of the complaints. I was going to ask you about that, whether that bothered you. Yeah, there were a lot of people like, no USB-C. I'm so, upset about that. But I don't know. Some people complain about USB-C too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, USB-C it's a really tricky one because when it came out, a lot of the cables that you were getting sent over from China and the rest of it weren't properly wired up. So you weren't getting anywhere near the benefit that you should have been from the new design. I mean, yes, it's still omnidirectional, but if you wanted the faster data speeds, certain pins had to be connected and very often weren't. And there was a Google engineer who's done a sterling job going through the Amazon reviews of USB-C cables and saying, right, this is configured correctly, this is configured incorrectly. And in a couple of cases, this could potentially balk your entire system if you plug it in. So USB-C is a coming thing. And I can understand Microsoft's argument that most people are still using the Type A and Type B ports, and that should be supported. And it should, but there's a simple solution to this: adapters. When I got my Google Pixel phone, it came with a USB-C to C, USB-C to A, and an A to C adapter. All you need to do that is bundle that in with a laptop and you're covered, but it means a little bit extra unit cost. And I know Microsoft is keen to wring the most out of it, the most profit out of its hardware division that it can.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's another story that you posted this week involving the Geek Squad, the FBI, and a gynecologist who likes child porn. This sounds like the start of a very bad joke, but it is not. What's the story here?
Well, this was quite an interesting one. This was a gynecologist down in Southern California who took his HP Pavilion computer into Geek Squad because he couldn't get it to boot up properly. Now, the Geek Squad engineers seemed to fix that, but wanted to try and recover his data. So they asked him if that would be okay, and he said yes. Now, on the hard drive itself, they found an image which, while not strictly speaking a child abuse image, was taken as a screenshot from a well-known child abuse video. And they reported this to the FBI, and the case progressed from there. And unfortunately, the FBI appear to have botched it since then. But it raised some very interesting questions because the court case showed that the FBI is offering bounties of up to $500 for Geek Squad employees who find these kind of images and report them. Now, obviously, Best Buy has said that they don't have a formal relationship with the FBI, but if they find these kind of images, then they have a duty to report them, which is perfectly correct. But what the court was saying in this case was that the guy had signed a contract with Geek Squad saying you have the right to go through my computer, and in the terms and conditions of that was if we find this kind of material, we will report it. He then verbally consented on a phone call, on a recorded phone call, for his drive to be searched. And this is what turned up the image, and this is what got the FBI called in. But the killer point here is that they found the image in a section of the hard drive which is for stuff that's been deleted. It's the unallocated portion of the hard drive. So generally, that's not a section you would look at if you were looking to recover data from the computer per se, which kind of suggests that Geek Squad engineers are actively searching for this stuff. Now, on one level, that's no bad thing because anybody that is involved in this needs to be caught and locked down almost as soon as it's humanly possible. But it does raise some interesting questions about the incentives that are being offered and what that means in terms of what Geek Squad engineers are going to do on your system if you take it in. I have no experience of taking computers to Geek Squad. I hear very mixed things from readers. Some people say that they try and sell you useless ancillary services. Some people swear by them. But in terms of the incentivization of it, I think, Geek Squad engineers are clearly looking for this stuff. They're incentivized to do so. And now they have the legal right, the legal cover to do so. At the same time, if it stops this kind of thing from happening, I'm all for it. But it does make me curious as to where Geek Squad motivations are.
Yeah, there's so many interesting things in this story, so many elements. Like, first of all, the incentive. I would like to believe that we live in a world where people don't need to be incentivized to report child pornography, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like that you would have to offer someone $500, that they wouldn't just, like, in the process of fixing someone's computer, come upon that or something else illegal and not just turn it in. Why do we have to incentivize that behavior? And incentivize monetary incentives, like you said, could lead to fraud, often lead to fraud. So, someone might then decide they're going to plant a picture in someone's computer or something like that. So, the other part of this story that you report is that they did reportedly find child pornography in this person's home. But then, as you said, the case was botched because of how the FBI, they said, how the FBI reported that the original photo was found. And because it wasn't found legally, then everything else could not be presented. The warrant was thrown out of court and all those things that were found, now we have to pretend that we don't know about them.
Well, that's still up in the air. I mean, it wasn't so much that it wasn't found legally. It was found in the unallocated section of the hard drive, and the Ninth Court of Appeals has ruled that if it's in the unallocated section, there's no real way of determining how it got there and who put it there. So it doesn't quite fall under the level of possession. Now, when the FBI went for their search warrant, they, for reasons known only to themselves, decided that they weren't going to mention that this picture was in the unallocated section. They then went and raided this person's place. They allegedly found thousands of images of this kind of disgusting material, made their arrest, and now they're in court and they're running into some serious problems. It just goes down to computer forensics is really hard. Lawmaking is really hard. And yes, I agree with you totally. There shouldn't need to be an incentive for this. There was a famous case in the UK with a singer called Gary Glitter who, in a very similar circumstance, took his computer in to be fixed at the local computer repair shop and was taken down almost instantly. And there was no bounty needed there. So I get kind of nervous that, bounties beyond what people should be expected to do normally are tricky. But there are so many elements of this case, as you say, where things that could have gone wrong have gone wrong. And I think we need to up the skill level of prosecutors going out for this so that they know not to make these mistakes in the future.
And you say that Best Buy, who, the Geek Squad runs inside Best Buy, that they say they have no formal relationship with the FBI. I mean, is it legal for them to accept money from the FBI to report these things? Is it legal for the FBI to pay? I mean, how is it different than entrapment?
Well, it's legal to pay informants under U.S. law, to my understanding. It's legal. Best Buy doesn't have, as I say, a formal system, but at the same time, paying incentives to informants is, as I understand it, totally legal. I just question why the need to. I mean, if you find something like this on someone's computer, my first instance is go and find them and punch them to the ground and then call the police. But this is the way that the FBI feels they can incentivize people to look into hard drives. Now, I can understand that might be a little bit concerning for people that take their computers in, but very few people have this kind of material on their hard drives, and if they do, they deserve to be caught. What the problem comes in with the incentive side of things is this, as I say, this was found in unallocated, and there really is no way to discover who put it there. So yeah, it could be that an engineer who fancies the quick $500 decides to stick an image in there and ruin someone's life. I think it's highly unlikely because you'd have to be a complete wanker to even think about doing that to somebody else. But the incentive is there. I think it's a really fine line. It's how far do you go on this? And in an ideal world, we wouldn't need to pay informants, but sadly, we don't live in an ideal world.
That's true. The other side that I found fascinating is that idea you're talking about, that someone could go to a website, like someone could build a website that had like child pornography or some other illegal photo on it, that if you just went to the website, this photo would end up in your system's cache, and then you described it as that your system would be cleaning up and would automatically delete that photo, so that if it were legal for the FBI to, if someone could lead me to his website, hey, check out this link. Okay, well, what's there? Nothing's there. And then someone could say, hey, check out Megan's computer, check out what's in her cache, her deleted cache, because I think you'll find something illegal in there. Can that actually happen?
That could happen. That could very easily happen. I mean, basically, like any sort of sensible internet users, we'll clear out our cache occasionally. And you're right, the amount of images that can be that can be uploaded onto your computer by a website is huge, and you may have no knowledge that they're being on there in the first place. And that's an important legal defense, which is, I think, one of the reasons why the Ninth Court ruled that the unallocated section wasn't legally to be counted as possession. I think it's unlikely. I mean, any website that did that would probably be flagged up pretty quickly by the various honeypots that are dotted all over the internet, and by sort of the national police forces which are looking for this kind of thing. But it's certainly possible. And so you've got to be really, really careful about how you apply these laws, and the burden of proof, as always, is on the prosecution, and they need to make sure they have pretty watertight cases. In this case, obviously, it's ongoing. My personal opinion is they seem to have found these images, and it doesn't look good for the doctor. But at the same time, we have a legal process for a reason, and sometimes it's galling when people walk away when they shouldn't, and it's good sometimes when people are found to be innocent long after they've been found guilty. It's the whole problem with internet law is that it is so fluid and changing much faster than the legislators can actually keep up with it.
Mm-hmm. And it's so often that we have to say, well, like, let child pornographers go. I mean, not often, but it's too many times. Once is too many times.
Once is too often, yeah.
to let them go, or let drug dealers go, because otherwise we would be violating their privacy in a way that we don't want to set a precedent. And that I understand that. Like, I applaud this Ninth Circuit judge who really seems to understand the way technology works better than your average Ninth Circuit judge to say, hey, like, you can't. You looked in this place that you didn't say you were looking.
Yeah. I mean, it's the problem is with these sort of things that, yes, when it's a child pornographer or a drug dealer, it's very easy to say, well, let's just let it go. But then once that case law is set up and it's applied against other people who perhaps the police don't like, or it's applied in cases where it's not so clear cut, but the case law has been established, then you've taken away an essential privacy protection. So, I mean, this is why, for example, when the FBI wanted to crack iOS, they chose a San Bernardino terrorist phone, because who on earth would argue that a terrorist phone shouldn't be hacked? But it has larger implications, because once that legal judgment is made, it's then expanded out across the whole board. So you've got to be really, really careful about how you apply. Despicable as these people are, it's the law has to be the law, and it has to be decided without emotion.
Well, thank you for reporting this story, because it's not fun to write about child pornographers possibly getting set free. But there's a lot in there. So check out his story. Moving on, according to an interview with Bloomberg, Uber will soon begin charging people what their algorithm thinks that person is willing to pay. A few months ago, we told you about Uber's new upfront pricing, the ability to see what you're going to pay at the beginning of a ride. And this was causing drivers to compare what people were paying versus the percentage that Uber was taking from them. The new policy doesn't mean drivers will get paid more, but it does mean you might get charged more if you're traveling from or to a place that makes you look like a rich person. And why is Uber taking more money from you? They say it's because you'll pay for it and because they need the money. So this was a really fascinating story. They're putting their investors over their drivers and saying, like, hey, we are going to take more money from people who can pay more money. And that way, like, we might at some point make a profit someday.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say this was a refreshingly honest interview from Uber, because, I mean, we've all remember sort of high school or in our case secondary school economics classes where you have the supply and demand curve, sort of supply is this way, demand is this way, and that's how you decide the price. And I remember graduating and then meeting my old economics teacher at a party, and you do realize, Ian, that all that stuff we teach you about supply and demand, it's all complete rubbish in the real world. People charge what they can get away with. And we see this in California. In the Bay Area has the most expensive petrol in the US. And yes, I live not 2 miles away from one of the largest gas refineries in the US. So, there's no real rhyme or reason to why we're paying such quite high prices, other than it's what the market will bear. And Uber is shifting into this model now. And it's not often I say this, but credit to them for being honest about it.
Yeah, I agreed. I mean, and yeah, that Amazon does the same things. I mean, that's what data is for, like figuring out how much you will pay for something. I think
how to squeeze the last cent out of you.
Exactly. And, this Bloomberg piece that they interviewed, someone who writes for a blog about Uber drivers and said, what Uber is doing is unethical. And it's like, but it's not the first unethical thing they've done.
Not by a long chalk, yeah. No. But I mean, I can understand Uber's problem in that, for much of their life, venture capitalists have been, every time you take an Uber ride, a venture capitalist is paying 40% of your fee by the numbers that we've seen so far. And they have to cut that burn rate down because there is an increasingly shrinking number of people who are willing to give them that kind of money to support it. And they are losing money hand over fist. So they need to get their revenue up. Now, the question remains is how they're going to do, they've explained how they're going to do this, but it's very easy to get a visit from Mr. Cocker, because if they take the hammer to their drivers too much, they're going to lose drivers. If they take it to their customers too much, they're going to lose customers. And, I mean, let's not pretend that, standard taxi drivers don't do this to an extent. If you've ever taken a cab, particularly in San Francisco, the cab drivers are dead keen to get you onto the freeway to get to your destination because that means the meter clicks over faster. So, I mean, it's swings and roundabouts. On one level, you could say Uber is being, sort of slightly underhand in this, but it's basically what goes on in the market every day of the week.
Mm-hmm. But it's another sign of what data knows about you and the effects of it. And what they say in the piece too is that it's a good thing, because if you are living in a low-income neighborhood, your drivers aren't going to be paid less to drive you there, and therefore you would have to wait long lines. Uber's been accused of that as well. Like, drivers will not go into certain neighborhoods, whereas I think I don't know if it was the same with cab drivers, if they had laws so that they couldn't avoid certain neighborhoods. I'm not sure.
Certainly in London they have to drive you within a certain limit, but we were talking about this in the office today when this story came up, and it was just like, you could have a lot of fun gaming this system. Just walk 4 or 5 blocks to a slightly shabbier neighborhood and then ask for your delivery point to be a little bit away from the club that you want to get to. You could have a lot of fun gaming this algorithm and seeing how cheap you could get your rides. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's just that we've got sneaky minds here, but what the hell?
Right. Well, we learned the math. We may as well use it, right?
Exactly.
Quick reminder that you can comment on anything we discuss. We love to get your email. You can email us at tnt@twit.tv. I am always on Twitter at Megan Maroney on Twitter. And, of course, you can subscribe to Tech News Today by going to our show page. That's at twit.tv/TNT. After the break, Jason managed to corral some Googlers at the conference and sent us a piece of his interview. Stick around for that. But first, let's take a minute to thank Blue Apron, the sponsor of this episode. Blue Apron is the #1 fresh ingredient and recipe delivery service in the country. Blue Apron's mission is to make incredible home cooking accessible to everyone. Blue Apron delivers seasonal recipes along with fresh, high-quality ingredients to make delicious home-cooked meals. Each meal comes with a step-by-step, easy-to-follow recipe card and pre-portioned ingredients that can be prepared in 40 minutes or less. If you spend a lot of time at restaurants, if you like to shop at those high-end grocery chains, you can find you're spending a lot of money. But with Blue Apron, you can spend under $10 per person for a delicious meal. Blue Apron sets the highest quality standards for their community of over 150 local farms, fisheries, and ranchers across the United States. They ship the exact amount of each ingredient required for a recipe, so Blue Apron is reducing food waste. They're reducing it for you. They're reducing it for everyone. Their freshness guarantee promises that every ingredient in your delivery arrives ready to cook, or they will make it right. I've never seen produce this beautiful in a meal delivery service. It's really stuff that you can't just, it would take hours for me to go to the grocery store and pick out all these different things, come up with the recipe, come up with the idea, and then cook it. I have to do that. Often I just buy the groceries and then never end up cooking the meal. But with Blue Apron, I don't have to do the shopping. It's there for me, ready. And it could be there for you. They deliver up to 99% of the continental U.S. There's no weekly commitment, so you don't have to do this every day. If you like to make up your own recipes, you can do that too, and then only get deliveries when you want them. You can customize your recipes every week based on your dietary preferences. If you want to be a vegetarian this week and you want to eat some meat next week, you can do that. You can choose from a variety of new recipes each week, or let Blue Apron's culinary team surprise you. Recipes are not repeated within a year, so you will never get bored. Here's the part where I get to make you hungry by reading some of the menus. Baked spinach and egg flatbread with sautéed asparagus and lemon aioli. Beef teriyaki stir fry with sugar snap peas and lime rice. Crispy salmon and roasted potato salad with pickled mustard seeds and creme fraiche sauce. Or 3 cheese and baby broccoli stromboli with tomato and oregano. Check out this week's menu and get 3 meals free with your first purchase, plus free shipping by going to blueapron.com/TNT. Don't forget to add the TNT. That's how they know that you came when you heard me talk about these meals. You will love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron. Don't wait. Go to blueapron.com/TNT. Blue Apron, a better way to cook. Jason is finishing up at the Google I/O Developers Conference this week. He had a chance to sit down with some of Google's top brass today. He spoke with Dave Burke, VP of Engineering for Android, Stephanie Said Cuthbertson, Director of Product Management for Android, and Samir Samat, VP of Android and Play. They covered a lot of ground, and you'll get to watch the whole interview on this week's All About Android. But here is a little sneak peek into their discussion of one announcement that made most developers very happy.
So speaking of development, one thing that I sort of picked up from talking to some developers around Google I/O this week, everybody's super excited about Kotlin. Why the switch, or why the addition of Kotlin? Why now? And why is everybody so excited?
It's a beautiful language. That's the short answer.
That's what everybody says.
That's what everybody said. They said it's easier.
It's elegant.
Steph announced Kotlin at Google I/O, and we're joking that Steph is the most popular person at Google I/O this year.
Yeah. Apparently.
And I think it's actually true.
Well, and I mean, Steph, it was obvious. You knew that was going to get a big reaction. Because the way you set it up, you could hear it in your voice.
We have never added a new programming language to Android. And today, we're making Kotlin an officially supported language in Android. So, Kotlin is what our developer community has already asked for. It makes developers so much more productive. It is fully Android runtime compatible. It is totally interoperable with your existing code. It has fabulous IDE support. And it's mature and production ready from day one.
Well, I think what you were hearing was I was excited.
Yeah, I know. I heard that.
Excited.
Yeah, I think we did have a sense of it. Kotlin was something that we did in response to feedback and a tremendous amount of interaction with our community.
Right.
So it was something that they had asked us for. In fact, it had gotten to the point where, every time I went on Reddit and did like an AMA, I would get asked about Kotlin. Every event, every...
Do you remember we had the Android Fireside chat last year, and I think you were in the audience watching this, but somebody got to the microphone and said, I have a question, but it's not for you, it's for the rest of the audience. And he turns around and he's like, how many people want Kotlin? And like half the room put their hands up, and we're like, Steph, we need to talk.
That was when you pulled out the notepad.
Yeah.
I was looking at Twitter like the night before, and there were a bunch of people tweeting and then responding to each other about what things they wanted Google to announce. And a lot of developers were saying, Kotlin, but there was also like this undercurrent of, this is one of the things that we want, but Google will never do. And I thought that was really interesting. I don't know why they felt that way, but there was a lot of that. And so I think it was we were really happy it didn't leak beforehand. We've been working on it for a while. Steph's been leading the charge on it, but we've been working on it for a while. It didn't leak, and Dave and I, which you couldn't see, is from the back of the stage, we can actually see out,
right?
But you can't see us. So Dave and I were like little kids, like huddled in this one spot so we could watch Steph and the audience. And we're like, here it comes, here it comes, and it lived up to our expectations too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I am not an Android developer. Kotlin sounds exciting. Do you have any thoughts on Kotlin?
Yeah, I mean, it does look like a really nifty bit of kit. I mean, the example they gave in the keynote was that with one Kotlin line, you can replace 87 lines of Java. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the programs are going to be that much slimmer, but it's an indication of how effective this can be. It's also, from a security aspect, it's null safe, which means it doesn't spit its dummy out every time it gets a null reading in there. So that's quite handy as well. I mean, it's a logical extension for Google in that it needs... I think for Android, it wants to build on sort of newer building blocks. And while, the JVM culture is all well and good, it's getting a bit long in the tooth. And this strikes me as a very good way to bring existing Java developers and expose them to something new without forcing them to use it, which is a very important point.
So, yeah, you said that it's Java without the security headaches. I mean, does that mean that Android will be more secure?
Well, okay, Android is already pretty secure, but the language itself doesn't make a massive amount of difference to security, because even the best language in the world in the hands of an inept developer is going to leave you with security holes left, right, and center. But what it is that Google is putting a lot of support behind this. It was clear from the reaction of the audience that the developers were very strongly behind this, and I think it's a very good move in terms of Google giving its developers the option to shift onto sort of more modern systems without abandoning the old. We're not talking like Intel introducing the Itanium and telling every x32 developer just drop your stuff. This was a genuine effort, I think, by Google to actually bring people on board, give them better tools, but not leave them, people who are still using the older systems by the wayside.
So you, like me, watched Google I/O from afar, which means we didn't have to wear any sunscreen. What was the most interesting thing that you saw from your vantage point?
Not the fire, then. No. No, I mean, the new build of Android looks very good indeed. They've been promising this. We've had one developer release. We're getting another developer release. I'm keen to see what they're going to do with this, because Android N, as it stands at the moment, has some issues which do need resolving. I think some of the stuff they were doing on machine learning was really interesting. This was fascinating. In fact, the machine learning panel that they had at the show was all women. And I've never, you don't see that outside of a women in tech panel. This is something which we're seeing a lot more women getting involved with, and that's really encouraging to see as well. But also, I mean, just the general feeling that we've gotten, having talked to our guy Tom, who's been down there, was that generally the mood is optimistic. Developers down there are feeling fairly confident about this. They know they've got the march on Apple in terms of the range of stuff they can get out there, even if they aren't quite making Apple developer revenues at the moment. But generally, a good show for Google. I think they can be happy with what they've done there.
Well, you can watch the whole interview that Jason and Florence Ion did on All About Android, twit.tv/AAA, if you don't get to watch it live on Tuesday. And we have some feedback. Brian from Wetumpka, Alabama, writes about our discussion of the Smalt, the internet-connected salt shaker. He says, I can just see it now with all the other smart devices. You were talking about the Apple Watch detecting issues with the heart. Imagine all these working together. Now, as you're going to salt your food, your Smalt speaks up and says, are you sure you should be doing this? Your blood pressure is already elevated. I will have to report this back to your doctor who told you to lower your salt intake. And this will affect your health insurance cost, this will put you in a higher risk category after they receive notice of you ignoring your doctor's order. Once again, where could this go wrong? So I don't know if you saw this, Ian, the internet-connected salt shaker. It's still an Indiegogo now. You can't actually buy it. I know you'd want to, but...
Please, after the internet-connected hairbrush, I just think this is getting absolutely silly at this point. But I will say, he has a very good point in that the way these devices are going to be used, strictly voluntarily, of course, at first, is going to be to monitor people that much more closely. I mean, if you remember some of the science fiction films like Gattaca that we watched in the 90s with, this is just hilarious, this would never happen. And we're getting to the point now where, if you run a bunch of IoT devices and the data is out there and the data can be bought by third parties, they're going to use it and use it to either try and modify behavior or try and sell you stuff. Mm-hmm. Now, I remember well your video at the last New Screensavers with you and your home device, but... which I have to say, superb acting skills, Megan.
Thank you. Yes, thanks.
I do worry about this. I mean, I don't have IoT devices in the house, not specifically because of this, but I just simply don't see the need for them. But yes, an internet-connected salt shaker. We have seen IoT devices already used in legal cases. There was a case in the UK recently where a bloke claimed that his wife, I think actually no, it was in the US, claimed that his wife had been, he'd come into the house and found his wife stabbed, and then they checked with her Fitbit and seen that in fact she'd been walking around and running around in different parts of the house, you know, well after the point at which she was supposed to be found dead, and the guy's been sent down for murder, as I understand it. So, you know, the kind of data that is being collected is increasingly being used in ways which the people that bought the device didn't envisage it was being used. And that's both a good and a bad thing. It might give us better clues to how to live more healthily, but if there's a coercive element in there, then I will quite happily reprogram that salt shaker with a chainsaw and just let it pour salt as it's supposed to do.
Well, after the break, Twitter thinks I'm a dude. But first, let's take a minute to thank Rocket Mortgage, the sponsor of this episode. I recently got a mortgage. I used the old-fashioned way, a dude. It was frustrating and complicated and decidedly low-tech. I am a busy person. I just had to believe that there was a more efficient way to get a good mortgage, and there is. Rocket Mortgage. When it comes to the big decision of choosing a mortgage lender, it's important to work with someone who you can trust, who has your best interest in mind. With Rocket Mortgage, you'll get a transparent online process that gives you the confidence to make an informed decision. Part of getting a mortgage is digging through all those stacks of paperwork, but with Rocket Mortgage, you can securely share your financial info to get a mortgage approval in just a few minutes. You can adjust the rate and the length of your loan in real time. Just sit on your smartphone, on the couch, or your laptop, or your Surface, or whatever. Slide those sliders. Make sure you get the mortgage solution that's right for you. Now, whether you're looking to buy a home or refinance your existing mortgage, you can lift the burden of getting a home loan with Rocket Mortgage. Skip the bank, skip all the waiting, and go completely online at quickenloans.com/TNT. That's quickenloans.com/TNT. Don't forget to add the TNT. That way they know we sent you to them. Equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLS, consumeraccess.org, number 3030. And we thank Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans for their support. And TNT's fan of the day is Doug. Doug sent us this photo with an email that said, on the drive to the latest 50K Ice Age in Wisconsin, I listened to several episodes, including episode 1765, in which you selected me as the fan of the day. I'm happy to report that I listened to TNT during Saturday's race, and I finished well before the cutoff. Thanks for the motivation. Show us how you watch or listen to TNT. Just record a video or take a picture of yourself or your setup. Post it on Instagram, Google+, Twitter, or Facebook. Use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT. You do not have to do any 50Ks. We'll take whatever, however you watch. You can sit on the couch, on your lawnmower, whatever, while you're getting a mortgage. Send us a photo or a video of you or your setup, and we are going to find it. Twitter has introduced new tools to let you get a better look at the information that advertisers are using to sell stuff to you. You can get in there and look at it in your profile. They got my age right because at some point I guess I gave them my birthday for some reason. I'm not sure why I did that. But they also think that I'm a male, because of my profile picture or because of what I tweet. I do not know. I don't know what to say about it. To Twitter's credit, they don't limit you to male or female. They let you fill in the blank. This does make a lot of sense because as I've said on the show before, the ads that I get on Twitter I never click on them. They're boring. They're mostly for enterprise software or things like that. Whereas like Facebook knows me and Instagram knows me, and I often click on those ads. So what do you think, Ian?
Yeah, I was kind of relieved when I checked mine that they did have me down as a male, simply because if you look at the top art on my Twitter profile, it's me getting married in a kilt. So it would have been quite easy for them to actually get that one wrong. I'm amazed that they put you down as a bloke. However, I mean, you're not even remotely butch, for goodness sake. You know?
Maybe I tweet about male things. I don't know. I do not know. So yeah.
Great example of how big data goes wrong, though. You know.
Did it know your age?
It got that pretty much right, but then I'd had to give in order to get my blue tick, I'd had to give them my age already. So that kind of came along with the territory. I mean, by and large, the data they got there was fairly accurate. But when Twitter updated its privacy settings earlier this week, I used that as an excuse to go down and lock it down as tightly as possible, because I'm fine to use Twitter. And you're right, it's got to say the advertisements that you get on there, the promoted tweets, are generally pretty grim. They're not particularly accurate, not compared to, say, Facebook or other sites. But, you know, when it comes down to it, I'd like to limit the amount of data these apps can take. But it just, you know, they're obviously on early steps on this. If they're getting gender wrong and something that, you know, particularly with the name Megan, you know, it's not a particularly common man's name. You would think there was some kind of correlation involved in there. So I think they've just let their machine learning systems get a little bit too much ahead of themselves.
Well, I have to believe that it has to do with the technology, that I'm most often tweeting about technology, but I don't know. I could be wrong, but it is. I mean, I don't think that what I put on Twitter is that different than what I put on Instagram or Facebook, but clearly it is. I mean, it just shows you how much more information they have about you, especially Facebook, and you know what they're using. You know, I get a lot of like clothes and furniture, and you know, just all the things. That I'm not tweeting about clothes or furniture ever, but it must be like my friends. Whereas on Twitter, mostly the people that I follow are all tech journalists. Yeah,
no, exactly the same for me. I get a lot of enterprise tech adverts, surprising number of car adverts, which is sort of slightly weird. But, you know, I mean, it all depends on what you put on your feed. I mean, we tend to put a lot more on our Facebook feeds about general stuff, whereas Twitter, I think, particularly in our industry, I certainly, and I think with, you know, I follow your tweets. We both seem to tweet a lot about work stuff and about the technology sector and about the things that we like on that front. So I guess, you know, the machine learning side of things, they're still working their way around. I've got to say, it's a bit disappointing if they assumed you're a man just because you tweet about tech stuff, because awful lot of women in tech and we need more of them. So it's just, you know, I think that's just a dodgy algorithm gone wrong. But I would have loved to have seen your face when you opened the screen and saw that.
Well, yeah, yeah, I should have. It's too bad. Well, I'm sure someone, because I don't have anything over my camera, so I'm sure someone's spying on me, and my expression's out there somewhere.
You don't tape over your camera?
Well, now I will. I don't.
It's interesting. I never used to bother, and then I was listening to James Comey giving presentations back when he was still director of the FBI, and he was like, no, tape it over. It's like, well, hang on. If the director of the FBI is taping over his camera, maybe it's time I should start doing it as well. You know?
Right, yeah. Unless you think he's a nut job like our president does, but...
it's just, I swear, my English friends are just like, are you sure this isn't a reality TV show? Because, you know, another 3 seasons of this is going to get really, really wearing. But, you know, it's every day there's something new. You know?
Well, thank you so much. Before we go deeper into this, down that path where we'll get email, thank you for coming on. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you're working on at the Register?
No, we're just sort of winding down for the day. We've got some interesting stuff on how Wannacry actually started, which I mentioned earlier in the show. I didn't do a story on this, but if you have seen reports that the Slavbard Global Seed Bank is being flooded out, don't worry, it hasn't. They just had a minor leak of flood water, which they felt dealt with perfectly well. Other than that, it's a beautiful weekend in the Bay Area, and I'm going hiking.
Awesome. Well, I hope to see you on the Screensavers or This Week in Tech or any of the other Twitch shows that you appear on, or here next time the next big ransomware attack hits. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Yeah, any day now. Well, I'm sure we'll talk to you in June when the shadow brokers drop their next.
Oh, yes. That's going to be very interesting times in more ways than one.
All right. Take care, Ian.
Have a good weekend, Megan.
Thanks. You too. Jason will be back on Monday. And, of course, TNT records live every Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific. That's 7 p.m. for those on the East Coast, 23 UTC at twit.tv/live. You can find us and watch us live. You can also be part of the show. You can email us at tnt@twit.tv or leave us a short voicemail. You can do that at 260-TNT-SHOW. We don't answer the phone, so you can leave it. If you get it wrong the first time, call again. We don't judge. You can call 3 or 4 times if you want to Get it perfect. It also doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be short. Otherwise, we can't use it. You can also find us on Twitter at TechNewsTodayTV, and you can find us on our subreddit. That is technewstoday.reddit.com. And we would love for you to subscribe to our show. And if you know someone who might like our show, we would love for you to tell them about it. Just send them to twit.tv/TNT. And if you want to tweet at me, I'm at Megan Maroney. Thank you to Kara, the best technical director since Brian. Thank you to Mario. Thank you to Kevin for editing the show. And thank you to you for sticking around and talking to us. We will see you on Monday.